control.
Yeah. Okay, let's go here in the room right here. Tell us who you are. And then.
Thank you very much. Martin Poliacik. I'm from the Kyiv office of GLOBSEC. Thank you very much, Mr. Lange, for your report. It's very popular in Kyiv, but then it causes also disappointment because people think it's a manual for them how to beat Russia, and then they found out it's a manual from them to the others. When we were in Kyiv with Richard talking to all kinds of people, one of the things that you haven't spoken about yet and I want to bring up is something that Mr. Lange called the total defense, which is basically it's not only the army that's fighting. And when we see the Rusi report about the first months of war, this was actually one of the main causes why Russian army didn't reach Kyiv, because they were so surprised by normal people standing in front of the tanks in the villages and towns.
Yeah.
Total defense means that it's not the army fighting, that it's the whole country fighting, providing intelligence, providing information, providing shelter, providing food, routes through places that the Russians have no idea that they exist. So what is the lesson for NATO country here? How are we actually able to bring the notion that we all need to sometimes stand up and fight if needed?
That's a very good question. How do you do that? I remember in the lead up to the war, as everyone was anticipating, oh, Kyiv will fall within a matter of weeks. Every Ukrainian I talked to said, every window will shoot. Every window will shoot. So how do you take that lesson and actually bring together popular, committed support, population-wide, across institutions, within NATO governments, and within NATO populations?
Well, that's a hard one.
Can I pick up?
Yeah.
Martin's absolutely right, and we haven't talked about it, and we should. And in a sense, it goes back to the point I made about this fundamental mindset shift in NATO countries. I talked about the importance of addressing it industrially, economically, and what I should have said, is, of course, is societally as well.
Yeah.
Well, number one, we look at what the Ukrainians have done. Number two, I would absolutely recommend looking at best practice within at least one new member state of NATO, which is Finland, which of course has practiced total defense because that's what has kept Finland safe for, they've got experience of this.
Yeah.
So we've got to fundamentally look at how we do this. And don't forget, there are lessons from the Cold War here, where there was civil defense and protection of key infrastructure and regular exercises against the threat.
Yeah.
So it is about that, but fundamentally, it all comes from the top. It's all about political leadership. And we are so far away in most Western countries, certainly in Western European countries of NATO, there is absolutely no recognition of the need to look at this issue of total defense, and there needs to be.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And I'll add one more because, moderator's prerogative, but the willingness to actually engage with journalists on this issue of what was going to happen in Ukraine, to declassify things, to allow us to actually tell the story about here's where the massing is going to happen, here's what the expectations are in terms of Russian brutality. That played a huge role, I think, in marshalling international support for strong sanctions and for committed support for Ukraine. Right over here.
Eugene Joly, I'm the Honorary Counsel of Ukraine in Montreal and President of NGO Ukraine 2050. You correctly stated that Kremlin thought that it would win the war within the first 3 days. The unfortunate thing is many pseudo-Western experts thought the same way, and they were clearly wrong. Mr. Lange, I'd just like to thank you for stating what to you is the obvious, namely that the war is won by Ukrainians and not the arms that were supplied so far. And I'd like to ask you the following question. Do you see, in order to avoid what the general said would be the worst case scenario, that there's a shift in the thinking from NATO member leaders to provide Ukraine the arms that they are asking, as opposed to having the arrogant position of stating, we know what you need, and provide it at a very slow pace that we have seen throughout 2022?
Well, there is in the UK.
Maybe just a parenthesis to the previous point on total defense. I am very skeptical if in our liberal societies it is possible to achieve this without changing legal frameworks. So just to imagine a patriotic push where now everybody is ready and willing to contribute to civil defense or total defense of our countries. I mean, Latvia has just reintroduced conscription. Sweden is thinking about reviving concepts of total defense they were very good at, but then they got rid of it in the 90s, while Finland kept it. To talk about a sense of duty or to have new forms of duty that are mandatory, I think it will be a necessary discussion. If we talk about resilience, that is a necessity like we saw in Ukraine, where in the cities at the Russian border, when the Russian attack came, nobody moved away, from the mayor to the city administration. Even the garbage collectors continued working while the Russians were just outside of the city. I think you need to think about whether mayors or governors need to have mandatory training to be fit for that office.
Yeah.
So I think there are also legislative questions and difficult questions for all of our societies to discuss. When it comes to the specific question of weapons deliveries and reluctance, I think Western societies were very shy, not necessarily to listen to the Ukrainians, what the Ukrainians want to have, but to understand that the political logic has to follow the military logic here. And I think the Ukrainians have learned this very well. By making a difference on the battlefield, they will change the political thinking in our countries.
Yeah.
And everything that, for example, Germany excluded has now been delivered.
Yeah.
Because the Ukrainians made us deliver it. So it's I think the lesson learned for partners of Ukraine must be look into the situation of in the battlefield and think about what is necessary to influence this situation on the battlefield, and not so much think about what is it that we have, what is it that we don't need anymore, what is it that is holding up in our domestic discussion. It's the military reality that should be focused on.
Samira, let me turn back to you to this question over here about capabilities and delivery, because we know that there's political sticking points around some things where there perhaps shouldn't be. Sorry. But to that point, there are new ways to create capabilities that perhaps don't have political obstacles in the way. Is this a discussion within industry? How do you create a capability that exists somewhere but isn't being provided? And is this the sort of conversation that industry can have right now?
So industry is certainly having the conversation. We're looking cross-sectorally anyway. That's one of the recommendations that came out of the Defence Security Industrial Strategy. We've done that around subsea autonomous systems, where we've partnered with the Oil and Gas Technology Centre and Subsea UK, because we're all looking for drones for different purposes. Those technologies are now being brought into capability. So that competition was run last year, so hopefully we'll see something on the front line soon. So we are definitely moving into that way, but it is about pace, it's about rapid technology into the users of the hands. We're not there yet, and it's because we're not fighting a war. We're still in peacetime in the UK, even though others are at wartime. There's a societal piece that we also need to think about, because at the moment it is affecting us from an economic perspective and an energy perspective. But from a physical defence perspective, it's not affecting us. So it's subconsciously, inconsiderate general public, just in general, because it's not on our door type behaviour. Right. But actually, we really need to start thinking about this awareness campaign, because it's going to affect everybody. We need to increase our defence budgets. We need the general public to understand why we need to increase our defence budgets. And there is an economic argument for the increase in those defence budgets. The work that we've done recently on the Joint Economic Data Hub has demonstrated that a person employed in the UK in defence brings back £112,000 back to the economy. So actually, it's a positive. Defence is actually, if you have defence in your constituency, that's a great economic added value.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a really good point. Quick Slido question here. Do any of you see signs of NATO militaries realizing the urgency of what faces us? I think your answer so far has been no. But how do you see this? Do you see any signs of NATO militaries realizing the urgency?
No.
You're still no. Okay.
Not enough. Not enough. And just if I may, I mean, I have great sympathy with the tone of the question about the supply of weaponry to Ukraine.
Yeah.
And in Kyiv, as Martin will remember, the Vice Prime Minister for Europe and Atlantic integration said to us that, yes, there's gratitude for what has been provided, but nevertheless, quote, we are sick and tired of dying while Western politicians dither.
Yeah.
And I can completely understand that, and many of us were advocating from the start that the taps should be turned on now. And if the taps had been turned on with offensive capabilities, that ridiculous, invidious distinction between offensive and defensive, which was bedeviling the provision of weaponry. So tanks, artillery, long-range precision fires, HIMARS, UK's just sent Storm Shadow, etc. If all that had gone from the start, or at least the willingness to provide it and turn the taps on, F-16 training of pilots, etc., etc.,
yeah.
Ukraine would be in a different place now, I suspect.
Okay.
That said, Nico's point about the politics of it is critical. And in a sense, it is, we have to give credit where credit is due. That, there has been this extraordinary provision of weaponry and capability and equipment. But I would also just push back slightly. I don't think there's been an arrogant assumption that we will give you what you want. I don't think it works like that. I think from what I see, the Ramstein process has been absolutely attuned to Ukraine's needs. Too often it's been too slow, yes, and we're getting there. But I think it is very much a partnership, and I think it's recognized as such in Kyiv.
Okay, in the little bit of time that we have left, I want you to try and take all of these things that we've been talking about and apply them actually, because we're learning the lessons from Ukraine, not just talking about Ukraine, we're learning the lessons, apply them to that vital mission of, in the United States, Indo-Pacific Command, but really it's a global mission of deterrence in the Pacific towards Taiwan. Can we move equipment in place in time to prevent a major Chinese incursion into Taiwan? Are we learning the lessons about NCOs? Are we learning the lessons about political support when it comes to the Taiwan case? Really quickly, we have about 30 seconds left.
President Xi will be looking, and the Chinese will be looking very carefully. If they see NATO, the West, providing the equipment, the capabilities, and learning the lessons quickly from the Ukraine war, that will be a major deterrent.
Let's win this one first.
Okay.
To be honest, we cannot be sure if we are at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of the war that is currently going on. And we will now see a staggered set of offensive operations by Ukraine that need support. But we need to face the reality of this and not have this wishful thinking, it will be over in a few weeks and therefore we do not have to make the effort anymore. It will be a long war. It will continue to be very hard. Also supporting Ukraine will be very hard. And I think if we help Ukraine win this, that will be also the best message.
Samira, real quickly.
Alliances. So the work around AUKUS, that is a deterrence in itself. You've seen the investment that Japan and South Korea are making significant. NATO have pledged to build the alliances with the Indo-Pacific. Those need to continue, mature, but again, it's around standardization, doctrine, connected training.
Okay. Folks, that's it. That's all the time that we have today. We're going to go to a coffee break, and after that, back here at 10:35, discussion champions, freedom fighters with Sofana. She's the head of the Belarusian resistance. I'm going to murder her name. It's going to be sad. But that's here at 10:35. See you in 20 minutes. But first, please, round of applause for my panelists. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.